Sometimes we want to execute one command only after a previous command succeeded. And in those cases, we use something called the AND operator, the ampersand, ampersand. It might look familiar to those of you who've programmed in Java or C++. It's very similar, except it automatically implies there's something that we use in Java called short circuit evaluation. So in the case of, if you were to see some expression like this in Java, it means that if this condition is true, only then will you try to evaluate this condition. Because if this condition is false, you don't need to evaluate this condition. You know that the whole expression will be false. And it's roughly the same idea in shell scripts. So this is something that's very useful in shell scripts, the AND operation, sort of like the AND operation in Java. You have two commands separated by double ampersand, that's the AND operation. And the meaning of this is that we will execute the second command only if the first command worked. That is, for the command 1 returns a successful status code of 0. So remember that in Bash, when a command returns 0, that means things worked. So this is sort of the opposite of other things that we will use in Bash and also in the usual way that we use C programs. Status code of, well, and I'm sorry, not a status code, but if you use a Boolean operation, a 0 actually means false. But in the case of Bash shell scripts, execute a command, the normal status code that you get is 0, meaning that everything worked. 0 means everything worked. And so in this case, if you get a 0 from a status code of 0 from this command, then you will execute this command. So this is sort of like saying if this worked or if this is true, then do this. You could do this with if statements too, but sometimes this is handy. So here's an example. There's a short script that says if you ls the first argument to the script, if that returns a status code of 0, then you will print out found. So what this script does is also, you never mind what it does over here with output redirection, but if you run the script with one argument, and that is a file or a directory, then you will the script will print out found. Okay, so let's take a look at what's going on here. What this is doing is, this is saying redirect the output to /dev/null. That's a standard way in Unix of saying I don't care what the output is. This next part says redirect the standard error to the same thing as standard out, which is /dev/null. So this is really saying ls whatever this argument to the script is, and if it worked, print out found. So we execute this command. Let's say this command is stored as cmd1. We say /cmd1 usually, /cmd1, and then the name of the file. If that is a valid file or directory found in the current directory, then we will see that the script prints out found. That's from here. Okay, so I have a script like this set up. Here it is. I called it lecture1109.sh. There's a bunch of things in here. First, you check if the number of arguments is less than 1. If it is, then there's no arguments. Then print out a message saying use this script with a file name as a command line argument. And then actually check in the script, I check if that file actually exists or not. That's the -e. And if it is, I print out a message saying, okay, it looks like this file or directory exists in the current directory. If not, it says this is not in the current directory. And then I do this thing that we're really interested in, which is to, oops, wrong one. Cat number 8, I believe. Okay, so number 8 has the same thing that we just looked at in the slide, that is ls this first argument to the script and put the rest of it, the output and standard error to /dev/null and then print out file found. Okay, so let's run this. /lec1108. It's not 09. Sorry about that. And if I do it with no arguments, I get that message. So that's from here. I check if the number of arguments is less than 1. Alright, so that worked. So I have to definitely give it an argument. I'll give it an argument that doesn't exist. So there's no file or folder, I believe, in this current directory with the name lec. So if you run this, it says it appears that lec is not in the current directory. Okay, so what happened was I did an ls, and the first argument, which was lec, I said ls lec, and that's what happened. This is what would happen if I said ls lec. So if I get an error, something like this, cannot access lec, that is going into standard error. That goes to the same place as standard out, which is /dev/null, and the status code will be something other than 0, probably 1 or something. And so in that case, this echo or print command doesn't get executed. Alright, so if I give it an actual file name, that's something that exists, it's like scr1 does exist, it prints out file found. Okay, so that's all of that is just to show you that you can do something like this. Use a command with redirection of standard output and standard error too, followed by ampersand, that is and, saying if this command, all of this stuff, ran perfectly with no errors, then I will execute the next command. Okay, so try that on your own. I just want to show you that there's also, just like the AND, there is an OR operation. And the idea of OR is that if you have two commands separated by these straight lines, remember this is the line that's right above your Enter key on the right side of your keyboard. Might look a little bit different on your keyboard, but it's two straight lines. It's one straight line. You have to do two of them to get to do the OR operation, just like you did in Java. Okay, so in the case of OR, we will execute the second command only if the first command returns a non-zero status code. That is a status code saying that there was some problem. So if you do the same thing over here, let's say, and we tried this with the previous script, we gave it a file name of a file that didn't exist, and then of course we know that we will get error code, so it's non-zero status code. And so therefore, if you have as an argument to the script you have something that doesn't exist and ls gives you an error, then you print out echo not found. Okay, so it's very similar to the thing that we just ran, but it's just slightly different. We use a OR instead of and we said here in the case of OR we say echo not found, whereas in the AND we said echo found. So let's take a look at that. This is number 9, like 11:9. And as before, if I don't supply any arguments, I get a message saying you have to use a command line argument, and I'll give it a fake name, something that doesn't exist, and it says file not found. If I give it a name of a file that does exist, scr1, it doesn't print out that echo. That echo doesn't get executed. So I'll cat this out. And you can try this on your own. Convince yourself that it does work. So all of this is just doing a little bit of checking. This is what we're really interested in. If the file that we supply file name that we supply as an argument to the script. If we ls it, and if it doesn't exist, this is what would happen. You get an error message. All of that goes to the error message. Actually goes to /dev/null, because that's where we redirect all of that stuff. And it returns a status code that's not 0. If that happens, then you execute this. So this is sort of like a short circuit evaluation in Java 2. If you have two Boolean expressions that are separated by the OR, if the first one is false, then there is still the possibility that the second one could be true and give you a true for the entire thing. If the first one is true, you don't have to execute this next statement. So there are similarities, but this is sort of used a little bit differently, but it's the same idea. Okay, so if you know about short circuit evaluation in Java, you're in good shape. It's essentially the same idea. Okay, so next up, let's look at while statements. While statements are very similar to for statements, and I have set up a couple of scripts that we can try out. Same idea. If you evaluate this condition, and you can have, just like with an if statement, so it should look a lot like an if statement, except that here you have a do, here you have a done instead of a fee. Remember that with ifs, we have an if, and then some condition, and then the if body, followed by the fee. Here we have something similar, while, the conditions, and then we have a do, with any number of statements here, and the whole thing ends with a done. Okay, so the condition commands are executed each time around the loop. You execute the command. If it's true, then you do all of this, come back around, try the command again, test it again. If it's true, keep doing it until the condition becomes false. The exit code of the last command in this list is the overall result. So whatever list of commands that you have here, it's the very last one that is the overall result of this while loop. If it is true, the task commands, so if the condition is, messed that up, sorry. It's the exit code of the very last command in this condition command, that is the overall result of this statement. Of this condition. If that is true, then you execute the task commands, and then you eventually you get through, you go around again, and then test these conditions again. Usually we just put one condition. So for example, to print out the first 20 integers, you set I is equal to 1, and then while I is less than or equal to 20, you can practically read this just by glancing at it. We print out I. So I have set this up as, I believe, lec 11 10.sh, and there it is, and I can execute it lec 11 10.sh. There it prints out I. I did this slightly differently just to make this all print out on one line. So, and I set a variable that equals the limit while I, well, initially you set I to 1, that's why you get a 1 here. While I is less than or equal to the limit, which is 20, echo, I use the -n option to have it all print out on one line. And then I bump up the value of I using the let operator. And final echo is just to give me a new line so that everything looks nice. But essentially it's the same thing as on the slide. So try that out. And we will look at some more while loops next.